Hello there. We are back on Small Ball. Welcome this fine Monday evening to all of you out there tuning in. I really appreciate it. It's so good to be back with baseball on the horizon, only 9 days from opening day. Again, thank you for joining us here. We got a great show scheduled today. Very sorry that I haven't been able to bring you guys too much off-season coverage, but we'll catch you guys up. We'll get there. We'll figure it out. And we have a guest today. So what I'm going to do is the schedule for today was a little bit was different until I decided to change it. So what's going to happen today, this is obviously a little bit of a different intro, but I'm going to skip most of the intro, bring on our guest, and then we're going to get to some other stuff we have planned. So joining us today from Edinburgh, Scotland, we have our good friend Athen Janos. Athen, how are you doing this fine evening?
I'm doing fine. Can you hear me clearly?
I can, yes. The audio is terrific. I really I'm impressed with your the quality of the sound waves that we're picking up.
It's the microphone.
Yeah. So that's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
Only the best for you.
Of course. So here's what we're going to do, Athen. This is going to be a bit of a different show because we've been off for a while. We haven't really been, doing too much small ball recently. And with the season coming up, I wanted to talk about some forecasting, right? Some predictions. And so I'm going to talk about that later on in the show. But what I want from you, Athen, is I know you're a longtime Yankee fan, right? And as are a lot of my viewers. Yeah, as are a lot of my viewers. So what I want, because the Yankees are in an interesting situation right here, and I'm going to dive into it as well. But I want to get your thoughts, Athen, on your expectations for baseball in the Bronx this year. How far do you think the Yankees are expected to go? What players will or won't have contributing, success in that regard? And what do you think is the, sort of the minimum that you expect from them, and also the peak of their potential, both on a team level and also on an individual player level? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'll start with expectations kind of for the team. In my head, I think the manager, Aaron Boone, right now is on the hot seat, in my opinion. I think with the roster they have and that they've built, I think the owners are looking at Aaron Boone and they're saying, look, the Dodgers have done it, the Red Sox have done it, the Astros have done it, right? We have just as good of a roster, and we haven't been to the World Series yet, and so I think this year, with a non-COVID year, with a full team, with the real ace, I think he's got to at least get to the World Series, to be honest, to keep a job, or at least put up a fight in the ALCS. But he can't look like. He can't get to the playoffs and look like they're the undermatched team again, because I think then it will be time to move on. And I think as far as is the ceiling, I think this is a team where you look at the roster, and yeah, they could, they have the potential, they have the talent on their team to win. Whether they have the collective mindset and the manager and the luck involved to get there, I don't know. But I think that's the ceiling for sure. And I think you've got to look at the team as a playoff team. I think that's the lowest, right? Like coming in, I think wild card would be kind of the lowest position I could see this team finishing. don't know if the Rays will win the division. I don't know if they'll win the division, but I really can't see, barring catastrophic injuries to a lot of their key players, I can't see them not making the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree. I don't. There aren't really a lot of paths, and there's a lot of good teams, and I'll get into some of this later. But they just definitely seem to be on just kind of another level than some of these other teams. What do you think about on an individual level? Who do you think is poised to be a big part of that success, and who do you think might not quite live up to the expectations of the Pinstripe fans?
Yeah, so I have a couple who I think are going to have really surprisingly good years. Not surprising, but going to have big years. Number one, on the pitching side, I think Corey Kluber. I think he's coming off 2 seasons, of injury prone, not really playing well. And I think, Tanaka's in Japan. He's playing behind, a real ace, Garrett Cole. I think he's going to, really step up to the plate, and he's going to surprise a lot of people and have a really good bounce back year for the Yanks.
Mm-hmm.
Not that not that he was on the Yanks before, but I'm saying he's going to, I think, everybody talks about Trevor Bauer, right? Both those guys were Indian pitchers, and everybody's talking about Trevor Bauer, going the big deal with Trevor Bauer. But I think people are forgetting a little bit that, how good Corey Kluber was when he was healthy and good on the Indians. And I think we'll see some of that in a competitive team, in Pinstripes.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, we definitely. I think recency bias plays into it a lot, right? We look at Bauer, we look at Kluber, we look at their careers, and I think Kluber has certainly had, a deeper level of success than Bauer, and yet we kind of look at them differently, at this point in time. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then the offensive side of the ball, I think the 2 guys I think are really going to have good years. I think, number one, Clint Frazier. I think this is a guy who's been just, waiting to get his opportunity to play a full season, to really just get a shot, to prove, who he was, who the Yankees got in that trade. And I think, he's showed a lot of maturity during the short COVID year. Showed a lot of potential. He's been playing well in the spring. I think he's determined to really prove that he's going to be, an elite player for them. And I think that, honestly, I think you could see him, you see like mid-time, I predict, come mid-time, come All-Star break, he's going to be in the conversation. I don't, this is bold, but I think he's going to be in the conversation, I think he's going to be in the conversation for RBI leaders, for double leaders, and I think he'll finish in the top 10 in MVP voting. I think he's going to really improve his glove. And like I said, I just think, give him a full season. He's determined. He's business. He acts like a Yankee. He's old. He's old-fashioned in some ways. He plays hard. He doesn't mess around. I think he's going to have a really good year. And the other guy, I think Tyler Wade is going to have. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people and be a really key part of the Yankees' success. I think, you look at the depth chart and, he's a backup in, almost every position you can think of, right? And you can't imagine a season where the Yankees don't have injuries in some capacity. So I think he's going to get a lot of playing time. I think he brings a lot to the table in terms of situational hitting. And I think he's going to be a really key part, in close games for them. with the new extra inning rule. I think you're going to see. Tyler Wade play a much bigger role in the Yankees' success, even bigger than he did last year.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, and then I was just going to say on the weaknesses side.
Mm.
It's not that I think he's going to have a bad year, but I don't see him. I think he benefited from the shortened COVID season, which is kind of like a sprint season. It's Luke Voit.
Yeah.
I really don't see him. He was talked about in the elite category during the COVID season. Like he was,
absolutely.
I don't remember if he was first or he was in the top. In the AL for home runs. People were thinking him. Oh, this guy is like he's have a first baseman. And I'm not saying he's a bad first baseman, but I think in a real season when it's not such a sprint, and guys are able to plan and look at his game plan, I think he might get off to a good start. But I think come mid-season, come All-Star break, he's gonna have a lot of strikeouts. He's gonna have like a big slump. Because people are going to adjust to him and have time to do that. And so I think he's going to struggle a lot too in this season. I'm not saying he's going to have a bad season or a bad year, but I think the level of success he had, especially last year, you're going to see a significant drop in that. And I could almost see a situation where LeMahieu, his fielding at second is, not going so well, and Voit is in a big slump, and I could see situations where they move Mayhew to first, put Wade in at second, and roll with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you raise an interesting point, because if Tyler Wade is able to have some success offensively, that opens up a lot for them, because I do agree with that. I also think Urshela, they've been talking at times about potentially Urshela getting some games in at short, depending on how things go with Torres. And I strongly agree with the Luke Voit take. I don't need to elaborate because you pretty much covered it, but I agree. I think last season was a sprint. I agree that he made a lot of adjustments that pitchers didn't really have time to adjust to those adjustments. He led the league in home runs, but again, over these last couple of years, with these new with this new Yankee lineup, this heavy strikeout lineup, he's actually led the way in that department, which is not something that everybody realizes. He has led the team in strikeouts since 2017 or since 2018. I do think that's an area of his game, especially in the postseason, that he certainly needs to iron out before he starts facing some top level arms. Anyone else you think? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, and the other part of it is his defense.
Yeah.
He's a liability defensively at first base.
Yeah.
And you think, the common thing is we'd stick anybody at first. But, I remember some plays last year when Urshela made a great play, across the diamond, throwing off his back foot and this amazing play, and then he throws a short hop to Voit, and Voit just completely blows it, and the guy goes to second. And it seems like a small thing, but I think those kinds of things can be very disheartening in a game and really change the tone.
Yep.
And just plays with other guys, a routine for other guys. Those are plays where you're like, oh man, Voit made that play, because you're expecting him not to make it.
Right.
Whereas with other first basemen, you just expect them to, they're like, they have a catcher's mentality, nothing's getting past them.
Right.
I remember with Teixeira, right? You knew, any ball that would hit to that side, between Cano and Teixeira, that ball was not getting past. You knew that, whatever the throw was, Teixeira was going to do everything in his ability to, scoop it, stop it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't think Voigt has that same ability to do that.
Right. For sure.
And then also, I think Aaron Judge is in a very interesting position.
He is. Yeah.
Because he's emerged as the kind of leader, right? Like when he was having his success a couple years back, he's kind of become into this Derek Jeter like player for the Yankees, right? He's become the face, the leader. But the difference to me, and the thing that Aaron Judge really has to step up and really, pressures on him is, right? Jeter won 5 titles, okay?
Mm-hmm.
He won in 96. He won in, they won in 97, they did, right?
98.
98, 99, 2000.
Yep.
And they went to the World Series in 2001.
Yep.
And then again in 03.
Yep.
Right? And then won in 09. Aaron Judge, he's come up. He's played well. He won Rookie of the Year.
Yep.
Finished second in MVP voting. But he hasn't taken them over the edge, to the next level in the playoffs yet. And I think that's something that people were kind of hoping he would be able to do. He would be like, that leader. He would lift the team up. And like the thing about Jeter is, you knew come postseason time, right? His game would elevate, and he would become, he earned his reputation as being a postseason performer. And, he would come in the clutch and lift everybody. And I think people were expecting that of Judge to, be that leader and also not only improve his play, but improve others around him's play, and really lift everybody up. And I'm not saying he's not capable of doing that, but I think pressure's on him this season. I think a lot of eyes will be on him to see, if he can be that dude, right? Everybody knows he's a great player, and everybody knows his ability to hit home runs, to hit for average, and to field and his cannon. But the question is he going to be, that dude, right, for the Yankees? Is he going to be the guy who, because Yankees had so many guys, right? You look back and you're like, these guys are icons.
Yep.
Not because of their performance, but because of the titles they brought to New York.
Right.
That's a very sacred thing, with the Yankees.
Right.
Is every year you're expecting, almost title or bust. The guys who can bring it to you consistently hold a special place, and there's a lot of them, right?
Yep.
26, 27 championships. So I think pressure's on Judge. This year he's got the roster. They got all the pieces, right? They've had a core group of guys like Jeter did. He's got to. I really think he has to show, a certain leadership and a certain ability to elevate the players around him's game. To be a leader for the team.
For sure, and I have to ask, Athan.
Tell me.
I greatly agree with that. But on the topic of players struggling, we talk a lot on this show. Very often, we talk about Gary Sanchez, and I think everybody has finally started to question him, and I think everybody is at the point where he is no longer invincible. He's no longer, protected by his outstanding rookie year, right? I think to an extent he was the last couple of years. That sort of shielded him from any criticism and potentially a loss of playing time. But I think that has escaped him. So I have to ask, Athan, where are we at with Sanchez? If he has another bad year, what's the plan? Is it too late even at this point? Do you think they should have moved off him this offseason? Where is he at now? Where might he be at depending on what happens this year? And
where, or have the Yankees gone right or wrong with Gary Sanchez?
Well, look, I'll start by saying this. I'll start with this. I'll start with going back to the Judge point, because I'll use it as a way to segue into kind of Gary Sanchez and some of those other guys, right? Okay, when you look at what the success the Yankees had in the early 90s, the late 90s and early 2000s, right? And the group of guys, right? You talk about the core four, right? You had Jeter, Posada, Mariano, and Pettit, right? Those were the guys. And I think a lot of people have been thinking that, the group of guys who came up in the Yankees farm system, a couple years ago, they were expecting them to be, those guys and to bring those, right? So I talked about the pressure on Judge to bring championships, right? But, Gary Sanchez is in that same, I think people considered him a crucial part of that, Torres, I know he came over from a trade, but he's another guy, who's in that same breath.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I think a lot those young guys, right, who came up with the team, who had this expectation that these guys are the next core four. I think Clint Frazier, he's a little bit, before then, but there is, some young guys on that team who you think of as being the core four, but I think really, I think there's really three guys, right? I think there's who came up together, essentially. You have Judge, Sanchez, and Torres. Right? Those were the guys that had, expectations of the world, right? And after the rookie seasons, they had great years.
Yep.
They made great pushes, and you're like, yes, these guys are going to be great, and we're going to get loads of titles to New York.
Yeah, big part of the 2017 run to almost the World Series.
Big part, right?
Yeah.
And it hasn't happened. It hasn't happened, and there's a lot of similarities, right? The great bullpens, So it hasn't happened yet. And like I said, the pressure was on Judge, but the pressure on Sanchez too, right? He had that great rookie year. Then he had a down year, right? Then he had a year where he actually, first half, he was a starter in the All-Star game, right?
Yeah.
And looked to be off to a really hard start, and then cooled down in the second half of the season. And I think finished around 235, but he had some injuries that, if you want to play the optimist, which I'm going to do because I like Sanchez, I'll give him pass there. He showed signs of still being able to produce. Last year, look, I think there's going to be forever an asterisk next to last year.
Yep.
I don't think there's not a literal asterisk, but I think you look at guys' stats and you'll just say, all right, these guys, but I think that asterisk is going to be made. Gary Sanchez has to make that asterisk appear by playing better in these next couple of seasons and these full seasons, right? If he stinks up the place, then there's going to be no asterisk next to his name, because people are going to be like, yeah, that's just who he is, right?
Yeah.
So he has to create the asterisk next to that COVID season and show, look, this is who I am. I think he's got to come out. I think he's got to hit, 30 plus home runs. I think he's got to get to 30 home runs. I think he's got to hit above, I'll say 240, right? Because he's a catcher. 30 home runs above 240. And I think he's got to look. I think a big part of this is you can't have an incident where a star pitcher comes out and says, I prefer the other dude. You know,
Yeah, that's
he's
bad
got to
news.
make.
That's bad news.
He's got to make sure, right? They're saying, they're starting Cole and Sanchez. Those are the opening day starters, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
If I were Gary Sanchez right now, I would try so hard to make sure that Garrett Cole and I are best friends, right?
Yeah.
We are so close on a personal level, right? That I want this guy to think the world of me, right?
Yeah.
I want him to want me as his catcher. And I think he's got to get back to, a lot of his, when he came up, right? He was, as a catcher, people said, oh, this guy has a cannon as an arm, right?
Yep.
I think he's got to, I think he was in his head a lot about this whole, blocking stuff, which was a problem. And I think he's just got to play, right? I don't like the new stance that he's doing, where he's like on one knee. I think that's a mistake. I think that's, thinking about things, and I think he's got to be more active. I think he's just got to, get out of his head and live in the moment and, compete.
Yeah.
Right? Help the team by throwing guys out, picking guys off, which he's done a lot. He's had some really, plays where, like, pick guys. There was a game against the Red Sox, right, where he picked a guy off at second. That was a big play a couple of years back, right? He's had defensive plays like that where he's, like, galvanized the team. And, look, he's going to have, by nature, any catcher's going to have, a couple pass balls in the season. But I think he's got to stay 10 to 20 in the league in pass balls. Right?
Yeah. He's led the league over the last 3 years. Yep.
Yeah. I think he's got to really, really clean that up, right? I think he's lost weight, so hopefully, that should help a little bit. And I think he's just got to do everything. I think the pressure's on him, too. Like I said, Torres, Sanchez, and Judge, and for different reasons, Stanton, right? Because, he came to a 2017 team, that, was a game away from the World Series, right?
Yep.
Against a team that is known to have cheated against them.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And if you look at that series, right, what happened? The 2 games at Houston, they lost. And they won all 3 by a significant amount in New York.
Yep.
And then they lost the last 2 at Houston. Where we know the Astros have cheated, right? You took a team that should have been in the World Series. In my mind, Girardi never should have got fired. It pisses me off that, that he was fired because of that.
Agree.
I think Boone is too much of a one of these sabermetric guys who just, and we saw it in the World Series last year, right? A manager has to be active. He has to lead the team.
Yeah.
It's not a computer game, right? You're living, these guys are humans, right? There's always outliers, right? If you look at a set of data and you could just go by averages, right? Averages doesn't mean every single data point stays the same and acts the same way, right? There's going to be fluctuations, and eventually, if you go long enough, it might come to a mean average that's in the middle. But there's going to be points where it goes up and down, and you have to be able to recognize. Part of the job of being a manager is to recognize, when those points go up and down and wager based on that, and not just, pick the middle, every time.
Yeah, that's a really good point. For sure.
So look, like, Stanton came to a team that, should have been in the World Series and probably should have won, right? And had a lot of energy, and he comes in, as this home run hitter, MVP, guy, it's like I'll compare it to something, right? The 2016 Warriors, who went 73-9, right, but lost to the Cavs because Draymond Green got hurt, or Draymond got suspended, right? There was a lot of controversy. Probably should have won that series, but Kevin Durant, an all-worldly player, comes to the Warriors, and people say he has to win, right? The Warriors have to win because if Kevin Durant comes here, being the kind of player he is, comes to a team that already was stacked beyond stacked, if they don't win, that's going to say a lot about Kevin Durant. And to me, that was the situation Stanton was in. Coming to a team that was already, stacked and moving on, moving up, and super, galvanized and juiced. And he comes to the team, and the expectations are, it's baseball and basketball, it's different because one guy doesn't have the same, impact. But it's a similar thing, right? You add Stanton, and you think the expectation was, oh my goodness, the Yankees are going to be unstoppable.
Right.
You throw Judge and Stanton in the same lineup, and then you have Gary Sanchez and Torres coming up, and all these guys, they're going to be unstoppable. And they went to the divisional series once. They went to the ALCS once. And they went to the divisional series again. They haven't even gotten to that 2017 level yet. They haven't even gotten to that yet. And so to me, just I talked a lot about individual guys getting pressure on them, but just the team in general. Eyes will be turning if they don't make it happen this year.
Yes, that's definitely true. There's a lot of good points, especially about Aaron Boone. I think Girardi's firing will always be puzzling. I think it's more personal than it needed to be. I think they definitely wanted one of those more sabermetric guys. And a lot of good points about Sanchez too. I think it's very interesting. I think certainly he has a role to play in his own return, right, mentally and physically. I don't know. I think it's funny because it seems like these teams, right, that are so talented and young, right, just continuously get better until they finally get there. But it feels like the Yankees have just been kind of treading waters, in the same place for the last couple of years. But yeah, is there anything else, you want to leave us with about the Yankees or otherwise before we let you go, Athen? A lot of interesting points for sure.
Well, just one point I have about the whole Girardi thing and Waste Sanchez, which I think people overlooked, was people said, they bring Boone to be a player's coach, right? To be best friends with the guys, right? One, I think that's a bullshit thing to say, right? You want your coach to coach. You don't want him to be, grabbing beers with the players, right?
Right.
But people overlook the fact that I think that you talked a lot, about it yourself, about the importance of the catcher position to teams. And, people undervalue how important the catcher is to a team.
Yep.
Right? Success.
Yes.
Girardi was a catcher.
Yep.
For the Yankees. Right? Not only that, he was a backup catcher.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So watching, guys develop, I think he was able to push Sanchez's buttons and, motivate him in a way, and to not only that, but to understand, the position that he was in. That I think Boone just, not really being able to see it from that perspective. I think he's missing that. I think people undervalue. I think people overlook the catcher position, the significance that it has. And I think Girardi being a catcher, I mean, this is just speculation, I don't know this, but I think, he made Sanchez feel like you're important, you matter to this team, we need, you're the catcher, we need you to step up, and if it was hard on him, it was because he wanted him to know how much he means to his team and how much him failing fucks up the team and how much his success is integral to this team. And that season, when they made it far, right?
Yeah.
Yes, Sanchez has some troubles, but he ultimately finished with a good season and played well in the postseason and was a big part of that year. And so I don't think that. I think Girardi's position as a catcher was overlooked a lot by people.
That's a really interesting point. When you think about it, which obviously you have, but I haven't. That the transition from Girardi to Boone is exactly when Sanchez spiraled out of control. I never really thought about that.
Yeah.
Very interesting stuff. Well, it's definitely a pleasure having you on, Athen. I welcome you back anytime.
For sure.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Very excited for the season. We're 9 days away. We have a lot to look forward to as Yankee fans, I think, in terms of success, but also entertainment value. I think it's going to be a very interesting team to watch, regardless of the outcomes. And we're 9 days away, and I think that Yankee fans are rightfully eager and anxious, for these wins to turn into playoff success. And I think at this point, it's interesting because, like, when you look at the roster over the last couple of years, it really hasn't changed much, right? So I think Yankee fans are kind of wondering, well, if we were good enough these last couple of years but didn't get there, what's it going to take, right? What are we ever going to be good enough? If not in 2017, 18, 19, 20, what's different in 2021? And I think that a lot of these cultural things are very important. And I do think there are some guys, like you said, Judge, Sanchez, Torres, who are playing well, but when you look at the grand scheme, need to step up and aren't really playing as well as you would need to lead a team to a title. So a lot of great stuff today, Athen. I appreciate you coming on the show.
I appreciate you for having me. I hope to be back sometime soon.
Absolutely, for sure. Anytime, give me a ring. Athen Llanos joining us from Scotland. Have a good night, Athen. Hopefully talk to you soon.
Yes, talk to you soon. Thank you.
Take care, bud.
Take care.
That was Athen Llanos. Always a good time with Mr. Llanos. I find myself, it's funny. I try to convince myself to not talk too much Yankees on this show because it's so easy to, because there's just so much to talk about. And I live in New York, so there's a lot of talk about it, and it's just kind of always on the mind. And it's hard to avoid, right? Because there's so much, there's certainly a lot to talk about and a lot to look forward to for Yankee fans, but we've been saying that for a long time. So I'm going to transition to this to close the show. Every year, there seem to be a couple of teams that are like popular underdogs, if that makes sense, right? Every year, it seems like people try to find a team or two that they're really high on that they think no one else is, and it turns out that a lot of people share that opinion. And an example of that this year, I'm fascinated to hear how many people are high. And when I say high, I mean like World Series like level potential on the Blue Jays. There's a couple problems here. Number one, they're young. youngest team in Major League Baseball in 2020. But the interesting thing about the Blue Jays is they don't feel that young. And I think that's in large part because their young players, 3 of them to be precise, come from baseball families. Of course, Biggio, Kevin Biggio, Vlad Guerrero Jr., and Dante Bichette, and Bo Bichette, all coming from baseball families, 2 of which have dads in the Hall of Fame. So they don't feel that young, but they certainly don't feel old. And the problem here that people aren't thinking about is Charlie Montoyo, their manager, who over the last couple of years has had, the roster kind of transition from old to young. It's gotten more dynamic. It's gotten more exciting, more energy, more talent. And it just kind of feels like, an underwhelming unit. And I don't think Charlie Montoyo is the right man for the job. Now, I said this a couple of years ago about Dave Martinez. I was not too high on him as the manager of the Nationals, and he went on to prove me wrong and won a World Series. I mean, that could certainly be possible. Charlie Montoyo is a young manager, not young in the general sense, but as far as managing experience goes, only in his 3rd season. But he does not add anything to the dynamic, nature of the Blue Jays. He doesn't add any energy. He doesn't add any passion, which is something that young teams need to have if they want to go on and have success. And the Blue Jays, to me, feel a lot older than they are, despite being the youngest team in Major League Baseball, because they have a lot of young players that come from baseball families. But the problem, like I said, is that they need to capitalize on that because they have youth, right? Which brings energy, which brings passion, which brings, a dynamic quality to it. And they have maturity and experience from those players. So it's a perfect situation. And of course, talent, right? Obviously that's the kicker, but they haven't, really been able, and of course they had a good year, right? They improved last year, but I don't see them continuing along that upward trajectory because I don't think they have the right man to lead them. And despite being experienced, despite being mature, these guys, 22, 23, 24 years old, are not capable of overcoming lackluster management, right? Some teams are. Okay, I think Aaron Boone at times, like Athen was just saying, has been lacking, and I don't want to be hard on him because he's actually surprised me in a positive way. But I think the Yankees have guys who can overcome that. I think the Nationals at times overcame through Rendon. Adam Eaton was a huge part of that on a personal level, on an intangible level. Howie Kendrick. I think in large part they overcame some of the struggles of Dave Martinez. And the difference between Dave Martinez and Charlie Montoyo is despite his struggles at times as a manager, he was able to keep a strong team dynamic and quality that the Blue Jays I can't really see having in 2021, right? Despite mistakes in decision-making, despite, just some managerial mistakes that Dave Martinez made back in 2019, the Nationals never lost their passion, their chemistry, and I think he was largely responsible for that. And I give him a lot of credit, especially coming from somebody who did not see him as somebody who was able to do that, and he proved me wrong. Another team that everyone's high on, pretty much, that I've heard, another young team that everyone's high on, of course, is the San Diego Padres. And I've been thinking about them a lot, and I'm going to close the show with this. I think we need to slow down on the Padres because we were talking about, for the majority of the show so far, we've talked about the Yankees. Now, what is it about the Yankees, right, that keeps them? And Athen pointed out, right, the Dodgers,
have won a World Series recently. The Red Sox have won recently. The Giants, obviously, over the past decade, have 3 titles. A lot of these big market teams, besides the Yankees, have been able to capture the crown. And he mentioned there was an interesting quote in Athens' little spiel earlier. He said Clint Frazier, and Clint Frazier's not relevant to what I'm about to say, but it's just an example, plays like a Yankee. Well, what does that mean? I mean, a lot of people roll their eyes when you talk about plays like a Yankee or plays with maturity or anything along those lines. Right? A lot of people nowadays are interested in what you do, the effect that your bat has on the baseball, or the effect that your arm has on the baseball, right? And are less interested with what kind of goes on behind the scenes. You guys know, if you know anything about small ball, that I look at it a little differently. So what does that mean to play like a Yankee? Well, in baseball, personality does not often help a unit succeed. I think in other sports it's different, but I think in baseball, we've had examples of teams with a lot of talent that was offset by too much personality and individualism, which is going to sound weird because it seems like personality and leadership and things like that obviously would help a unit succeed. And in many ways, when done correctly, they do. But the problem arises, I should say, when players have personalities that are associated with themselves, that are associated with their own identity rather than the identity of the team. And this might not make any sense. Like I can totally understand if I'm not phrasing this correctly, but let me give you a couple examples. The Dodgers over the last 5 years, let's say, have had a ton of personality. And actually, let me rephrase that. A ton of personalities. Personalities. Sorry about that. And they've struggled in the postseason, right? We're talking about Bellinger, who I love as an intangible player, as a tangible player, but he has an identity, right? He feels like the next, kind of the new age, right? He feels like the leader of that organization. He has an identity, right? I think that Justin Turner certainly has an identity, despite being a leader of the organization for many years now. I think he has an identity. I think he has a personality. I think Manny Machado, when they traded for him, certainly has an identity and a personality. And you might be asking yourself, like, where in the world am I going with this? But when personalities are too individualized in baseball, things kind of go awry. I mean, Athen mentioned that in basketball, one individual player can have, a huge impact on the team, right? And I think that individualism and identity is very important in, let's say, basketball, right? I think LeBron James or Kevin Durant can carry teams, right, and have such a large impact on teams that their identity and individualism can actually help the unit at large. But in baseball, when that's not the case, having people not really on the same page, the same level in terms of personality, I think can complicate things. And the Dodgers struggled mightily because of that. And that was something that I talked about, over the last couple of years, was how the Dodgers didn't feel like a powerhouse postseason team because I didn't feel like all of their players were working towards a common goal. And of course, on a literal level, they were, or at least they said they were. But I don't think they were approaching their path to a championship in the same way. And then what changed in 2020, like I've talked about on many occasions, I'm actually wearing my Dodgers jersey right now, which is fitting. I didn't even realize that, was Mookie Betts, because he shifted that mindset, right? He completely revamped the organization from a bunch of guys who were talented and had big personalities and all wanted to win, but were doing it in different ways.
he completely shifted that mentality. And you could see if you watch the Dodgers play in 2019 and then in 2020, how much more communal the team was. And I think of a specific example when Bellinger robbed the home run in the NLCS, and a lot of people got on Brusdar Graterol for throwing his hat and kind of going crazy in celebration for that. And I defended him, which, you know, you might find peculiar because I don't love those big celebrations. But what I did like about it, and why I think that specific celebration was exactly what you should be looking for in a team that's poised for success, is because it was about the team at large, right? He was excited for his teammate rather than for himself. In the case of, you know, the 2015 Blue Jays, right? Not to name any names, or the Dodgers of years past, right? It's been a lot of bat flipping and individual success, right? And then, you know, bring Mookie Betts into the picture, and all of a sudden, and we just talked about the ability that Aaron Judge has to do that, but hasn't quite been able to make it work yet. The effect that Mookie Betts had on that culture, it's not even really explainable. The level of leadership that he exhibited last year, I don't know if I've ever seen that before from another player, and it's very obvious to look at. It's very easy to look at the Dodgers and say, a great team adding another great player, and all of a sudden they're a championship team. But it's a lot more layered than that. And they had the talent to win in years past, but they couldn't because of those cultural challenges. I meant to talk about the Padres. I don't know how I got so I went on a little Dodgers sidetrack there. But back to the Padres for a second to close the show. The Dodgers have a lot of personality. Okay, Fernando Tatis, Manny Machado, Tommy Pham. I mean, the thing about Blake Snell, like, okay, so I like all of those guys individually, and I like Tatis a lot as a leader. I think he's going to be one of the best. I think he's probably the next great captain, right, along with Aaron Judge and potentially Cody Bellinger, and certainly, I mean, Mookie Betts certainly already has that title. But of the young guys, I think he's the next great leader. And certainly talent-wise as well. But there's a lot of individualism on the Padres. And I think if you can understand kind of what I'm saying and relate that to what the Dodgers looked like the last couple of years, I think you can kind of see where I'm getting at here. I don't think of the Padres as a postseason powerhouse this year. A lot of people do. I honestly expect them to struggle in the postseason, and we'll get more on that when we get there. I think Jace Tingler had the best season of any manager last year as a rookie manager. I think he and Don Mattingly, it's kind of 1-2 or 1A and 1B in terms of managerial seasons last year. So if there was a guy that can do it, that can smooth out that individualism and make it a cohesive unit, I think Jace Tingler is one of the premier managers to be able to do that, especially if he improves upon his rookie season, which he certainly could. And I'll get into more specifics on that in a bit when we talk about managers, down the road. But there's a lot of personality here, and it's not really a team. It's not really a team dynamic per se, right? I think there's a little bit too much individualism on the Padres. There's a little bit too much personal celebration and personal success and emphasis on that. I think Fernando Tatis is too big right now for the for the Padres, right? When you think about Aaron Judge, right, you think about the Yankees, right? You don't think about Aaron Judge per se. You think about him as a piece of the puzzle, right? When you think of Fernando Tatis, you think of him as the leader of the Padres, and I don't think that's a good thing. I think in the same way that you think of Mookie Betts and you think of the Dodgers, right? You don't think of him as separated from that. I think when I think of Fernando Tatis Jr., I think of him as the face of that organization. And I think when an organization has too strong of a face, that can lead to problems. And of course, this is all kind of semantic, intangible, subjectivity, but I think it matters, and I think it's relevant to talk about. And I do think that because of a lot of those things, the Padres are not quite at that level that a lot of people think they are. And I think they are certainly going down a path to get there very soon, but I don't think this year is the year. And I think although the Yankees don't maybe have as much talent as the Dodgers or maybe even the Padres, both of those teams, especially now that the Dodgers add Bauer, have a lot of individual personalities, and the Yankees feel more cohesive, especially building this team over the last couple of years and not really changing too much around. Right? I've thought over the last couple of years, I've wondered why the Yankees haven't, changed it around too much. Right? They had LeMahieu, of course, but even that wasn't expected to be a huge addition at the time, right? And I think they're kind of getting at something that none of us really realized, or I didn't. I'm not going to speak for everyone else, but I didn't really appreciate the importance of that unit and limiting the amount of individual personalities, right? And building from within, rather than adding a Bauer, which is just, obviously adding talent can help, certainly. But the more personalities you have, I think, the more complicated it can be. And complicated in baseball, it does not usually equal success. I think other sports, it can look different. I think, having individual success in basketball, for example, I think is a good thing, because I don't think it needs to be as cohesive personally. So that's all I got today for small ball. Nice long show. Really appreciate Athan Llanos coming on and joining us today. A lot of great things, great thoughts and points from him. I've said this before, but now I'm finally able to do it. I think I should be able to post a recording of the show, and not only a recording, but potentially snippets of individual pieces of the show for some quicker content, right? On YouTube, on the channel. So, certainly if you miss a live show, you can go back and watch it, or you can go back and watch, if you don't quite have as much time, you can go back and watch individual kind of segments. And I think that should be, if I can make that work. It's difficult when I do the live show because I can't really capture that. When I used to record the shows, it was easier, but I think I have figured out a way to do that. So be on the lookout for that. Thank you so much for joining me today. Again, big thank you to Athan Llanos for joining us. Have a healthy, happy, and safe rest of your Monday. Baseball is on the horizon. We're 9 days from opening day. And I think I certainly owe my viewers, all of you, some quality small ball content leading up to the season and certainly during the season. I have a lot of stuff planned for the season. As far as small ball goes, we have some interesting segments that I'm going to introduce and leading up to the season as well in the coming days. And I think Wednesday is my best guess as to when our next show will be. I think tomorrow is unlikely, but I think it's likely that we have one on Wednesday. So certainly be on the lookout for that. I'll notify the world. Oh, I forgot to notify the world today that we're live. That's tough. We did have decent viewership today, but thank you so much for tuning in. All of you that did, have a healthy, happy, and safe rest of your Monday and Tuesday, and Wednesday, and every day. But yeah, like, subscribe, comment, recommend if you feel inclined to do so. And I appreciate you joining me and Athan, our guest today, on a great Monday evening edition of Small Ball. A lot of fun. I'm super excited for the season, and I expect that a lot of you are as well. So we had some quality Yankees talking today, talking Padres, some Blue Jays. We're going to get into some more predictions as the season approaches. Certainly going to give you my playoff predictions before opening day, some more player-oriented predictions as well, and It's going to be a lot of fun. So again, thank you for joining me. Take care. Have a good one. And I appreciate the support in the return to small ball. And we should be back Wednesday. So take care and be on the lookout for that. All right. Take care. Peace.